Hello everyone, welcome back to Women's Sports Update. I'm Caitlin McDonough, joined alongside Stacey Collier II. And because March is here, it can really only mean one thing in the sports world. March Madness is here.
Oh yeah.
And I think the biggest storyline so far for the women's tournament is Juju Watkins' injury. She suffered an ACL injury against Mississippi State. USC did go on to win that game, but this is a player that has scored 30% of her team's points so far this season. I mean, how do you replace someone like that? You're a big USC fan. What do you kind of feel about the injury?
It's devastating. I picked USC to win the national championship, and unfortunately, without Juju Watkins being on that team, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to have to change my pick, in which we'll talk about towards the end of this segment. Like you said, 30% of the team scoring finished with around 23, 24 points per game in the entire season, and just was a driving force to why USC was picked by some, even though they weren't the outright favorite, by some to win the national championship. And it's an ACL injury too, and you never know how a player is going to recover from that. We've seen it time and time again. I just think about players like Klay Thompson in the NBA, to where it took him about 2 or 3 years just to get back on the floor. So hopefully, and I'm hoping that she has a speedy recovery process. She could get back on the floor by the time we hit 2026, because I don't know if she's going to be there for the 2025 start, at least, through December. But it's very unfortunate, and I think it does end USC's chances to win the national championship.
It definitely hurts them, because an ACL injury, it's so tough to come back from. We've seen it. So many women's athletes, they just can't recover in time. They have a higher risk of getting that injury. But, Juju's not just good on the offensive side. She's really great at defense as well, disrupting passing lanes and really just setting the tone, whether they want to pressure out or do a zone or a man defense. But this means that other people do have to step up. And one player that I'm looking to particularly step up is Kiki Irefin, the senior. She had 36 points and 9 rebounds when Juju got injured. If she can get the ball in the paint, she's a big player. She can use her size and handles to, spin some defenders around and get the ball in the basket for them. But it is a huge loss. I just think that some players, especially like Kaylee Heckel, she can really lob the ball into her. That's what USC kind of did against Mississippi State. They just sort of lobbed the ball to her into the paint, let her do the work. So she's someone that I can think that can really step up. She does need to take a leadership role. And someone else that can step up as well is Avery Howell. She's really great at shooting the three-point shot, and I think she's someone that needs to stay ready. Kiki Irefin draws so much attention to her in the paint that if she can draw an extra defender in, she can leave that space open on the perimeter for her to shoot the ball.
Which is why I think Kiki is the most important player going forward for USC, and will be the reason why they make it through to the Final Four, the reason why they don't. She's also primed to be a first-round pick coming up in the WNBA draft, so this definitely going to affect her stock too if she can't step up in this tournament. And like you said, she has to be a leader. She's a senior. She's been there. She can be a dominant force. I think she was around about 18 points per game this season, something like that. Can be a double-double. Does have to work on passing out the post. They're going to have to feed her early and often in their next game in the Sweet 16. I think that's the only way they can at least get to the Elite Eight. But, again, I just don't see them as a Final Four, alone a national championship team without Juju. It's just too big of a loss to recover from this late in the postseason.
Yeah, especially as you go deeper into the tournament, the games get tighter and tighter, and you're going to need to rely on those offensive weapons to get you ahead early and often. I think USC does need to hunker down on defense. We kind of talked about scoring in the paint, but they think they need to be a little bit mindful of protecting the paint as well. Mississippi State did, kind of work the ball really inside and attack some of those players. So foul trouble, I think, is also going to be something that they need to avoid in order to move on. And, USC, they have a lot of great defensive talent, but they like to sort of pressure out sometimes and go for those steals. So I think they need to be a little bit smarter in deciding who they're going to pressure out to, because if someone gets caught out, that can just blow the game wide open. And I just think this leads for an easier path for UConn now to move into the Final Four and potentially even go on to win the whole thing. You know, I know you have UConn now in your bracket. You know, what do you sort of feel about them?
I'm thoroughly impressed with UConn, and that's kind of an understatement because in their 2 games they played so far against Arkansas State, they scored 103. Not only they scored 103, but they only gave up 34 points. Oh my goodness. And then San Diego State put up 91, only allowed 57. They just playing lights out on both ends right now. Of course, Paige Beckers, we all presume her to be the #1 overall pick going into the draft, WNBA draft. They want to have her go out on top. AZ Foot announced that she's returning, so they have that energy from that. It's just amazing that UConn, I'm being impressed with the historical context of them. Like time and time again, they just prove that they belong in a Final Four. It's not a Final Four without UConn, so they're the team that I've been thoroughly impressed by the most.
I mean, if you watch previous March Madness tournaments, everyone pretty much going into the tournament knew that UConn was going to be the one to lift the trophy almost year after year. The competition has got better in the leagues. You know, UConn is one of the winningest, probably the winningest actually, you know, team in the March Madness ever. And, you know, the coaching staff, Gino Ariema, he's very good at what he does. So I just think that UConn might just have the advantage on that side of the bracket.
They might. I think it's going to be still a tough road ahead for them. They're going to go against stiffer competition coming up, but they're going to play Oklahoma, and Oklahoma has Reagan Beers. Reagan Beers is a dominant, brutal force down low, 20-10, walking 20-10. They're going to have to find a way to guard her, throw different bodies at her, throw different looks at her, because they can knock off UConn. Even though I've been impressed with how UConn been playing on both sides, Oklahoma has that star player and they have the team to do it. So they got to watch out for that.
I think when we talk about UConn, we always talk about the offensive side of the ball, but maybe not sort of the defensive side of the ball as much. But like you said, Oklahoma can really just kind of get in there and maybe cause a big upset coming. Who knows how, you know, it is March, it's madness, so I guess we'll see.
I don't think it's going to be that big of an upset, though, because Oklahoma has been good. And they just landed, I think they just landed the #1 player coming in next year. So, like, they have a great program. But, I mean, UConn right now should be expected to go to the Final Four at least.
Oh, 100%. I agree. I mean, going back to USC, you know, if they were to advance, which I think they would definitely be able to beat, you know, this Kansas State team. I don't think this Kansas State team is particularly talented on all sides of the ball, but, you know, they won by 1 point overtime to Kentucky. Kentucky is a great team led by Georgia Amore, but it's just not a team that I think is going to cause them too many troubles for how much talent they have. Yes, Juju is a big loss, but I think they will advance past Kansas State. Then the question becomes, can they advance past UConn?
I don't think so. That's why I have to replace, I'm sorry I got to do this, but I have to replace USC out the bracket and put UConn in there. Just like without Juju, it's just not going to happen, and especially against UConn of all teams. And hell, I would say even Oklahoma, if they make it there past UConn and they go up against USC, I think Oklahoma will win. But I think UConn ultimately will come away in that region. Followed by UCLA. Love Lauren Betts. She's a dominant force down there for UCLA. Then I have Notre Dame. Now, Olivia Miles been dealing with some injuries, but as long as they have her on the floor and she can just distribute the ball, be a pass-first guard for that team, they still got enough players, enough talent to make it to the Final Four. So I got them, and then, of course, I got to have South Carolina. South Carolina is just unreal. That's all I can say about them.
You can't go against Dawn Staley. It's just absolutely, you know, they're such an incredible team. I'm sort of along the same lines with you. I do have UConn and South Carolina in my Final Four, but I also have NC State, someone that has caused some upsets this season. They beat Notre Dame. They're the #2 seed. They can really, you know, create some headlines, and I just think the energy that they bring, that whole team atmosphere, I think they're one of the most, you know, underlooked or underrated teams in the Final Four, hopefully. And I also have Texas, you know, they're #1 seed. They've had a phenomenal season so far. I have them winning past Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is a great team. If Olivia Miles were to, you know, suffer an even more severe ankle injury or just not play at all, I think Texas can advance. But I do think that even with a healthy Notre Dame team, they've shown signs, some struggles towards the end of the season. So that's why I have those teams in my Final Four.
Let me put you on the spot. Do you see NC State as a dark horse to not only go to the Final Four, but to win the whole thing?
Oh, absolutely. I just think that the energy that they bring is just unmatched. And when you talk about March Madness, you talk about team chemistry, the vibes going into it. You know, you look on the positives, and I think NC State, you know, you look at, you know, UConn, South Carolina, Texas, all these big headlines swirling around them. But people aren't really talking about NC State. I don't want to call them an underdog because they are so highly rated, but I do think that they are one of those teams that people are overlooking just slightly and are just thinking that, oh, UConn will run this side of the bracket and South Carolina and Texas will sort of, or maybe even Notre Dame will run that side of the bracket. But I think NC State does have a real chance of winning.
As a fan of the game, like somebody that just wants to see great basketball, I would not be mad if NC State makes to the Final Four or wins the whole thing. I like stories like that, teams that people don't really pay attention to. Everybody's drawn to the powerhouses. We already talked about them. Then all of a sudden you have NC State taking the whole thing. So I'll be happy if they win, but I don't know if they're going to pass UConn or even South Carolina if it comes to that point.
And just one last thought, you know, who do you have winning the whole tournament?
This is tough. I'm gonna say UConn. I'm gonna say UConn just because it's Paige Becker's last hurrah, and this is our opportunity to go on top, which doesn't really happen that often in sports. And when you have the opportunity to do that, you have to take it. They've been playing lights out. I think they've been the best team in the tournament so far, and they're going to continue to do that. I got UConn.
I'm in total agreement with you. You can't bet against Paige Beckers, especially in her final year. She's going to want to bring the trophy back to Connecticut. But that's all the time we have in this segment. We're now tossing it over to Boone, who's talking about MMA.
Thanks, guys. The UFC has an absolute peach of a slate for the next 3 weeks, starting with UFC Mexico in 2 days. Then we're heading back to the Apex in Las Vegas, and then UFC 314, which is just an incredible slate down in Miami. But we have 5 women's fights. I will be breaking them down. I will tell you who I think is going to win and why you should tune in. First up, we got Lupi Godinez, Auntie Lupita, fighting Julia Pilastri out of Brazil. Honestly, in Mexico, I don't see much of a way that Julia Pilastri can come out of this with her hand raised. Lupi Godinez, she has looked phenomenal. Yes, she's coming off these 2 losses, but look at who she's fighting. Mackenzie Dern. She's fighting Verna Lohadina. She has been unbelievable all throughout, and she's the number 11 fighter. This is an amazing opportunity here for Julia Pilastri to make some inroads, and I'm not saying she can't win, but Lupi Godinez on the feet in her home country, I think has this locked up. Second up here, we have in the UFC Apex, the smaller octagon, Dione Barbosa and Diana Belbita. Now, the Warrior Princess, only 28 years old, but already her UFC career is on the ropes. She's 2-5 in the promotion, and this is kind of a Hail Mary shot up against the Brazilian. Now, I personally don't believe that Diana Belbita has what it takes here to win this fight. Now, this is another matchup where my favorite is coming off of a loss to the ranked fighter in Miranda Maverick. I believe, though, Dione Barbosa is absolutely a monster. The Witch, coming into this fight, she has all the confidence in the world. She is knocking on the door of a ranking. Now, she speed ran the sport, and now coming up against a weakened fighter and someone who has not fought in a long time with Belbita, last fighting in February of last year. I personally think that Barbosa, the Witch, gets her hand raised in the Apex. Next up, also at Fight Night, Emmett v. Murphy, we have Vanessa Demopoulos and Talita Alencar. This is just an amazing fight, a real treat. Now, Demopoulos, the jiu-jitsu specialist, going up against Alencar, who is a grappler all round. I think, honestly, that jiu-jitsu wrinkle might be the extra leg here. Now, this is all about who's going to get the submission. I mean, you look at these 2 fighters. You have 4-1 in submissions for Demopoulos, and you have 3-0 in submissions for Alencar. So it's probably going to be a straight grappling fight. We've seen Demopoulos make amazing work off of her back. We've seen her get out of situations that, frankly, no fighter really should be able to, and then come out with an armbar, come out with a guillotine, come out with a good choke. I think that Demopoulos may get battered around early on in this fight, but I think she could possibly come away with something creative. I'm not sure if it'll be a submission, but I think at the end of the day, by decision or by submission, Demopoulos comes out the winner. Now moving on to UFC 314 in Miami, Nora Cornell versus Haley Cowan, and you just love to see this. Haley Cowan, she has been out of the promotion for 2 years. First, it was that ovarian cyst that ruptured. Back before her first fight, she came back out of that, but she lost under unanimous decision to Jamie Lynn Horth. Now, after a shattered shin and a broken fibula, she finally makes her second fight in the promotion, and that will be against the streaking Nora Cornell, who's currently number 13 in the bantamweight division. Now, this is a real Hail Mary here for Cowan. At 33 years of age, she really will need this fight. There's just not enough here for me to say that she is going to be able to win. Now, Nora Cornell, what does she have? Muay Thai kickboxer. She honestly should win this fight. You also have to look at the storyline for her. At 35 years of age, this might be her last run at a chance at a title shot. She needs to win this. But Haley Cowan, with everything to play for, with her career on the line, I think she could possibly be an underdog pick here. Now, going into the larger octagon, I think that this is going to be a stand-up fight. Both are strikers, but again, as I said before, that extra wrinkle, right? You're having a freestyle fighter going up against a Muay Thai kickboxer. I believe Nora Cornell gets her hand lifted by decision. And finally, the true pièce de résistance. I have saved the best for last here. Verna Handaroba out of Brazil, the number 3 in the strawweight division, a really class strawweight division, going up against the true contender, the one and only Yan Xiaonan. I mean, what more can you say? The number 1 going up against the number 3. Xiaonan, she possibly might be the only one in the strawweight division that could take down Zhang Weili, who has just dominated everybody. Now, everyone said Tatiana Suarez, she's the only one that can touch the current champion. And this fight right here is going to decide who is going to have the next shot. Now, it's pretty different fighters here. You have Handaroba, entirely grappling based. You have Xiaonan, entirely striking. And we have seen a high volume of strikes out of Xiaonan. She has dominated fights. She comes in to dictate. But Handaroba, boring fighter. And that's not an insult. Handaroba gets on top, she gets control, she gets 3 takedowns, gets control, walks out. Frankly, while I think the odds makers are going to say Xiaonan should win this, I look at this fight, I look at what happened between Pereira and Ankalaev, where Ankalaev forced against the cage and just took control. I think the Brazilian walks into this fight, pulls the upset, keeps control on the mat the whole time, makes it an uncomfortable fight for Xiaonan, and gets her title shot after all of these years, possibly her last run to take down Zhang Weili. I'm Boone Gross. This has been Women's Sports Update. We are so happy to have you with us. Tune in next week.